Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, are you ready for an election?
Well, ready or not, it's going to happen, my friend,
Here
isn't
it comes.
So we both were at the Liberal convention that nominated Mr. Carney as leader. It was an interesting weekend, I must say. And now, we're getting ready. We think the writ should be dropped in about a week. Parliament has to be back otherwise in, 12 days? So it's going to be quite a spring for Canada and for you and I.
Yeah, especially for us. Yeah.
We're going to be extremely busy. So where do you want to start here today?
Well, we should start with the Liberal leadership results. As you mentioned, we were both there as media. We got passes to do that.
Yeah, we should mention. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
We were not voting members. No. We were there observing, like you would, like cheetahs in the Serengeti. And I was shocked. I can't tell you when because I wanted to grab some photos and some sound and stuff like that. I was recording when the results were announced.
Oh, really?
You Frank Bayless, 3%. Yeah. Like, okay, 3%. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Actually, I think I said 3% on our last podcast.
Yes, you did.
And then it was 3.2 for Karina Gould. And I went like, wow. And then I heard 8% for Freeland. And I think I couldn't prevent myself from some sort of swear word, I don't think. So I probably stepped on the sound. And then 86% for Mark Carney, winning every single riding.
Yeah.
None of them were close.
No.
This was just a remarkable performance that I really don't think no one predicted this. I heard some people now and then being like, maybe you can get into the 70s, but 86%. What was your reaction when you heard those numbers?
Well, similar to yours, I was doing arithmetics in my head. When they said Karina Gould at 3.2%, I was like, oh, that's an underperformance. What happened there? I'm not sure that the second and third choices were released by the party. We saw the votes per riding everywhere. But I was I was front row among the print journalists. I was with Politico. Next door to me, there was a Washington Post, Le Devoir, and Globe and Mail. And just counting, it's like when they said 8% for Miss Freeland, it's like, hang on, 3 plus 3 plus 8, that's 14. Whoa, yeah, 86%. But thing is that 86%, as impressive as it is, when we've seen some butt kickings in leadership races, like Mr. Nenshi was big, Mr. Poilievre was big, but the fact that he won every single riding for me. I mean, he did not even drop one. And I know some of these ridings, you look at the Côte-Nord in Quebec, I think there were 40 voters. But many of them had many hundreds and many thousands of voters. He did not lose a single riding. For me, that really sends a message. This guy, whatever you think of him, Mr. Carney, he's in complete control of this party now. There will be no second guessing. There will be no factions, at least for a little while. And now we are heading straight, it seems, into a general election. There will be no governing except for maybe a few announcements about the carbon tax. He mentioned it in his
a few
victory
orders
speech,
in council just to get some stuff done.
And then no house sitting until probably mid-May or maybe early June. We'll have to see. So
he's being sworn in on Friday.
Yeah.
And apparently this is when the cabinet will come out. By the time you're listening to this, maybe we already have an idea who's in cabinet. As we're recording this on Thursday morning, we don't know. Though apparently there might be some non-MPs, which is actually pretty interesting. So we'll see what those people will be. And then there's the speculation of when the writ drop would come. Traditionally, it's on Sundays. Maybe it would be a couple days later. But it does seem to be setting us up for an election somewhere at the end of April, maybe May 5th.
Yeah,
depending on how long they want to go. So we're going to get right into the campaign. It's going to be something. Just to go back, I wanted to just put a little bit of context. So Poilievre got 68% in his leadership win. He won 330 of 338 ridings. So Jean Charest won a couple in Quebec. Justin Trudeau won 80% in 2013. Joyce Murray won a few ridings, like in her area of Vancouver.
Wow.
And this one didn't have a single one. 11,000 votes for Chrystia Freeland. Joyce Murray, who was a trivia question you had for me last week.
That's right.
Won more votes than Chrystia Freeland did in a race where there was fewer people voting. Like, it's just a remarkable result. It does show that the party, as you said, made the decision, collective decision. Karina Gould might have ran a good campaign. Maybe there's some people who had still some loyalty to Chrystia Freeland. Doesn't matter. We all got to get behind Mark Carney. That was the message in Liberal circles. And as you said, he now controls the party. It does suggest that he has some organizational chops, or at least the people behind him do.
Yeah.
So that'll bode well for them in the campaign. And one of the data points we had after we recorded last week was the fundraising. Had we seen the fundraising, I think I would have been a lot more adamant that he was going to win pretty strongly, because he was raising pretty much 3/4 of all the money that anybody was raising.
Wow.
Right? So that was the indication that he should win easily on the first ballot. The fundraising is always a sign of that. And his campaign says they raised $5 million. The Liberal Party in the first quarter of a year, so the first 3 months, has never raised $5 million. So it does kind of show that.
That's so. I did not know that.
So, well, I mean, maybe they did back in the day when it was brown envelopes, but ever since the things changed over the last 20 years, they've never done it. So they're going to have some money going into the campaign. So it's going to be competitive. Should we go over our performance and predictions?
Nah, I don't think so. No, we should pass
accountability.
that.
This is an accountability podcast. So we did some over-unders. We both
did.
took the under on 1.5 rounds. So we both actually at least thought that Carney would win on the first round.
Yeah, but we were hesitant a bit.
We were.
Right?
We were.
I mean, we felt that, the fundraising shows that, and the polling, it should be only one round, but maybe, and not even close, right? So...
There was some leadership polling that turned out to have no relation to what actually happened
whatsoever.
It might have been numbers pulled out of a hat. We had an over-under of the amount of the gap between Freeland and Gould. I'd put it at 10 points. You took the over.
Yeah.
I took the under. It was 5 points.
Well, she didn't. I mean, Miss Freeland did not even get 10 points. So even if Gould did not have a single vote in this race, wow. I know, right? So
this was the only one we actually did well. 5% for Bayless. I took the under. You took the over, but you did it mostly just to be different. Mm-hmm. And then finally, how many provinces would Carney win? I put the over-under line at 7.5. We both took the over, and it was an adamant, very clear over. I think his worst performance was like 84% or 83% in one of the provinces. So no doubt there. We had another over-under on number of days before the election call. But we're not going to find out.
Yes, we did, huh? And what was the line? I don't remember.
I think I chose by Sunday, and you chose after Sunday. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's going to be after.
I'm starting to think it'll be. There's not enough time to do everything, but if it's Monday or Tuesday,
that's close enough.
Anyway, I think it is close enough. Anyway, that was the leadership race, and let's get to the campaign.
It was the convention was, it's always a fun time. I love these conventions. I went to the Conservatives in Quebec City in fall of 23. I went to NDP events. I went to Québec Solidaire last year, Parti Québécois. I love to go to these events, talk to the people there. This had a different energy, Eric.
They seemed upbeat.
Well, the thing is, it was very plausible. Let's say I tell you around Christmas, the Liberals will have a leadership race in March, and we could have walked into with the mood of a funeral home. If the polls had shown, the Liberals are at 20%, and if you add Mr. Carney, maybe 22, they would have just, but they were really upbeat. Many believe that they have a shot now, and the polls seem to suggest that they are correct. So let's get to that.
Let's get to the polls. Yeah, we will.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, okay. We'll get to the polls now. We had a few, not too many that are entirely post-Carney. Even the polling that we saw from Léger that a lot of people were talking about this week included some pre-Carney numbers, though they were only. It's as if Léger understood that he was going to win, because even their polling that they did on like Friday, Saturday said Mark Carney, Liberals. So we got an indication there. So last week we talked about whether the surge had peaked. Yep. Now is the surge back on? We're not going to do this every week, we promise.
Well,
yeah, the Léger poll had 37% for the Conservatives, 37% for the Liberals, 11% for the NDP. So it was a It went from a, what was it? A 3-point gap?
It was to a 13. Yep.
Now to 0.
What do we think?
Starting to think that 13 might have been a little bit on out of left field.
Well, when you look at the progression of Léger polls since January, I had pulled that chart for those who follow me on social media. So in early January, it was a 26-point lead. And then in late January, it was 17-point lead for the Conservatives. And then early February, it was 9 points. And then mid-February, it was 8 points. And then late February, it was 3 points. So you could see a clear trend line. And then March 1st, 13-point lead for the Conservatives. The surge is down. I mean, I saw La Presse and other media says, oh, Monsieur Carney has peaked. Hang on. Now 37-37. So it looks like Léger poll from last week, from early March, may have been that infamous 28 out of 20. Not that the numbers were necessarily wrong, but they may have caught a little conservative rebound that is not observed at all in this new poll that has Carney numbers. So is there something from that poll specifically that caught your eyes, Eric? Is there like a set of numbers that stand out to you?
Well, there was the fact that, as you said, it was a tie, and we see that it was a tie in Ontario, which is kind of a big deal because we haven't seen a lot of polls that have showed that close of a gap in Ontario.
Yeah.
Was waiting to see if there would be any change after the Ontario provincial election in case there was any kind of bleed over. 27% for the Liberals in Alberta, starting to doesn't look so bad for Mark Carney if he decides to run at Edmonton, but just in general, I mean. It's a competitive race. And it's anybody's to win right now, which is a remarkable thing to say after 2 years of us, all preparing for a conservative landslide in 2025.
I wonder how long this would last, though. I mean, and to go back to the numbers here, the numbers in Quebec for me, I live here, so maybe that's why it stuck me so much. But Léger had 2 polls this week. So there was a national, federal poll, but there was also a big sample size Quebec-only poll. And this one, the Liberals are in front. We've seen the Liberals, have taken the lead in Quebec in several polls now. But the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois are tied among francophones, Eric. We had not seen that in a long time. And in fact, if you look at the results of the past election, Justin Trudeau in 21, he won 34% of the vote against 32% of the vote for the Bloc Québécois across the province, which means that the Bloc Québécois won the francophone vote by maybe, 7-8 points. So, again, this kind of makes me a little uncomfortable when I look at those numbers and I look at my projection map. Because if it's tied among francophones, there are some ridings that we're missing right now. There are some surprises. Maybe suburban Montreal, maybe Quebec City. The numbers from Léger in Quebec City, of course, it's a regional subsample. But the Bloc had a 20-point lead in the Quebec-only Léger poll in December. And now the Bloc is 3rd in Quebec City. And so there are 2 seats in Quebec City that the Bloc holds, right? And they were really hoping for more. If Quebec City has flipped on the Bloc and now it's a conservative versus liberal race, we could have some surprises. So we are again in flux right now.
Yeah.
And I look at some of these numbers and I go like, okay, that's kind of strange. How do we deal with that? So, yeah, to be continued. And as you said, Ontario, a tie, that's a big advantage for the Liberals. If it's tied in Ontario, that's probably a Liberal minority overall.
Now, your projections on 338 Canada don't include these new Léger numbers. That's correct?
No, they will on Sunday.
Okay. You and I both had the great pleasure of being on the National on Monday, which was a lot of fun. And we were very, very grateful to have that opportunity, and we really enjoyed it. We had at that point, they put up both of our projections. They put mine and they put yours, mine with the poll tracker, and they were a bit different. So this was before, as mentioned, that Léger poll was included in
Yeah.
yours. It is now included in mine. I've updated mine.
Oh, okay.
So mine still has an 8-point lead for the Conservatives because mine takes into account older data than yours does. It's going to start speeding up once the campaign gets going. But for now, because they're outside of a writ period, it kind of takes into account older data maybe more than it should when things are in as much flux as they are right now.
Yeah.
And then for you had a 6-point lead. So it wasn't a big difference.
No, it wasn't.
But right now what we have is that I have the Conservatives winning 168 seats, 132 for the Liberals, 28 for the Bloc, 13 NDP, 2 Green. And you have 156 seats for the Conservatives, 143 for the Liberals, 28 Bloc, 13 NDP, 2 Green. And I assume once this Léger poll goes in, are you going to have the streams cross when it comes to that seat count?
It's going to be close. Well, the thing is, okay, so basically what I told my readers on 338 is that once we get the new leader in Mr. Carney, I will drop all numbers that include Justin Trudeau. So you could have des soubresauts, as we say in French. We could have some shaking up of the numbers for next Sunday. I haven't done the calculation yet. I'm waiting to see whether there will be other polls. Well, thing is, we saw other polls.
I'm sure there will be.
The nanos, but we will have other polls before Sunday. I think Monsieur Coletto of Abacus Data already signaled that he was on the field this week. And that will be interesting because you and I know that Abacus numbers have been much slower well, not slower, that's not the right term, but they've been less bullish on this liberal recovery than other pollsters. So, could we see Conservative +8 from Abacus or +6? It's possible. So I will wait to see these numbers. But if I just take that Léger poll federally, and I add, of course, the Quebec numbers, that's a Liberal win. That's a Liberal win. I'm not sure it's a majority. The numbers in Atlantic Canada are astonishing, right? The sample sizes in Atlantic Canada are always small, but that's several polls in a row that all show not a small lead for the Liberals, but a double-digit lead.
Yeah, over 50%.
Yeah. And so the Liberals could gain seats. They hold 24 in the region. Well, 23 if you don't count Halifax. But they held 24 after the last election. Could they even increase their total? That would be something. But to go back to your projections. So when the campaign starts, do you update every second day, or what's your rhythm during the campaign?
Once the campaign gets going, I'll be updating every day. Now that we've been getting closer to the campaign, I'm updating now whenever there's at least 3 new polls. I'll have more updates on the poll tracker, and then every day, I'll have some new numbers. So we'll have lots to talk about during the campaign.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you're watching, we're planning to put out more episodes during the campaign, probably 2 a week. One that'll be for Patreon members. So if you want to get that episode, you'll go to thenumberspod.ca. But we're going to have so much to talk about, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We started this podcast in September 23. So this was the beginning of the Conservatives moving ahead. And then we had about a year and a half of talking about just how big this lead was getting and how bad things were going for the Liberals. And now we're actually going to be in the midst of a campaign, which is going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be a competitive race, which is what we like above all, right? Because when it comes to watching the polls, it's dull when anybody is ahead by 20 or 25 points, as we've seen in, that Ontario election. Not too exciting. But when it is an election that's going to be competitive, I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in to follow along with the polls, and I think it's going to be a heck of a race. But I do wonder, like you said, how long the Liberals can sustain this. This is a leadership honeymoon.
Yes, it
Sometimes they don't last very long.
No.
Sometimes they do, as we saw with Wab Kinew in Manitoba. But I should say when he won the election. But some of these honeymoons are one and done, gone in a couple of weeks. Sometimes they're not, and we just don't know what we're looking at right now just yet.
The laws of gravity apply here because we know the Liberals will come down of this at some point, but will it come down during the campaign if Mr. Carney has a poor campaign or if Mr. Poilievre exceeds expectations? But it could also come down once Mr. Carney has his own mandate and he's set in for 4 years. Before we move off this, I just wanted to go back to the Léger poll from Quebec. You may remember at the end of 2024, we discussed, could the Conservatives maybe make a breakthrough in the western half of Montreal, maybe a western half of Laval, which would be a first since, oh my God, Brian Mulroney in 88. The numbers among non-Francophones, 52 Liberal, 23 Conservatives, 11 NDP. So that's done. I mean, I think that all this talk about maybe Mount Royal going to the Conservatives, unless there's a huge surprise, now that's done. And I don't think any seat on the island of Montreal should be that competitive, save maybe Hochelaga in Rosemont-Est. But a changing landscape. At some point, we will have, you and I, to make a little list of maybe the 20 ridings that we will watch, because that could be fun for our listeners. Right now, some ridings that were projected as close are not projected as close anymore because the Liberals have gone up. If they go back down, then they're back on the table. So,
if we had made that list on January 6th, when Trudeau resigned, I don't think a single one of those ridings would still be on our list today. Because a lot of it was about like whether the NDP would win seats from the Liberals in places downtown where they, they were tanking. Now the NDP looks like they're just going to be fighting for their lives for every single seat that they can.
Yeah.
And for the Conservatives, it's what can they win the seats, make that progress they need, particularly in the GTA, in order to close that gap in the seat count. So it's going to be a heck of a campaign, so I can't wait. We did get some provincial numbers. So over the next couple of weeks, we're probably not going to get many of these anymore.
No,
I don't think a lot of pollsters are going to bother polling any provinces, because maybe Newfoundland, Labrador, we'll see.
Well, yeah, but the campaign is in the fall, right?
Yeah, I know. So this might be the last time we chat about any of them. We did have those numbers from Quebec, as you mentioned. Léger did that poll, and it showed not a huge amount of change, and not that different from the poll we discussed either last week or the week before. Why don't you present the numbers?
So, Léger in Quebec, 1,000 cases, 30% for the Bloc Québécois, which is...
Québécois.
The Parti Québécois, provincially, yes.
Yeah, federal on the mind.
I know, right? So 30%, which is a tad low compared to their numbers over the past year, but it's still a first place. Coalition Avenir Québec, François Legault, 24%. That's a bump of 3 points. But it's still well within range of the numbers we have seen over the past year, between 20 and 24. Quebec Liberals, 19. No real change here. And Quebec Solidaire and the Conservatives, the Quebec Conservatives, at 12% apiece. Is there something that stands out for you in this Quebec politic?
Two things. One is we're not really seeing any bump for François Legault.
No.
Based on how he's reacting to the tariffs, for example. I think we're seeing that from a lot of other premiers.
Yeah.
That the stance that they're taking is resonating with their own voters. And it's different stances, right? You have like a Captain Canada approach in Doug Ford has working really well for him, and even Danielle Smith's more Alberta focused kind of view also seems to have helped her from the very few data points that we have from out of Alberta. But we're not seeing anything from François Legault. A little bit of an uptick, you said, but it could just be margin of error kind of thing. Yeah. And then also just those sovereignty numbers, still 29% in favor. And I think it's showing how the focus on the United States, focus on Donald Trump, is changing what was going to be the focus in Quebec. It looked like we were heading towards more of an old-fashioned, sovereignty versus federalism debate. Kind of feels like now the PQ is a little bit out of step with where kind of people's priorities are, and I think that'll also transform the kind of debates we're going to have at the federal level in Quebec.
Well, okay, I agree with most of what you said. I'll push back though, because I do not think that the Parti Québécois thinks like this. They see those numbers and they see we're still leading, and so 29% in favor of sovereignty, 30% in favor of the PQ. That's pretty much in line. Of course, when you look under the hood, it's a bit more complicated than that. The PQ would still win an election, with these numbers. I mean, they're leading by 12% among francophones. But those sovereignty numbers have to make you think, if you're the Parti Québécois. It's just what took them to 30% in their minds was sovereignty. And they're not wrong. There's fatigue with the Legault government, obviously. But talking about sovereignty and the need to have a referendum before the end of the decade, those are M. Plamondon's words, this is what took them there. So should they tone down this rhetoric because maybe that's not the mood of Quebecers and Francophone Quebecers? Maybe, but I'm not sure that the PQ base wants to hear anything that suggests otherwise, right? And so he's in a bind right now, Mr. Plamondon. That will be interesting. Mr. Plamondon, I think I said on this podcast, has pushed every good button in the past year and a half. He will be tested with this because those questions are coming. And at some point, he's going to have to answer seriously and not answer with slogan that no, Quebec should be independent. Like right now, 30% of those who say they vote for Parti Québécois would vote against sovereignty. That's not negligible. That's a third of your base. And if you decide to have a sovereignty election next year, and we still have Trump and the threats of tariffs and annexation on our minds, they could be talking amongst themselves, is what I mean. So, it's gonna 29% for sovereignty in consecutive léger polls. That's a hit for the sovereignty movement in Quebec.
All right. Do you want to move on to one last poll out of British Columbia? We got another set of numbers from Research Co.
Yeah. Local pollster. Yeah.
Local pollster, more or less the same we've seen from everywhere else. 44% for the BC NDP, 42% for the Conservatives, 11% for the Greens. More or less identical to the last election, which is what we've seen from a number of polls now. Yeah. But things are happening in British Columbia.
Yes, they are.
So what we had was that one of their MLAs, Dallas Brody, was ejected from caucus over things that she said about residential schools, and then two other MLAs resigned in solidarity, and they're talking about maybe starting a party together. It feels like the inevitable splintering of this party that got together in a bit of a shotgun wedding. With the BCU, it almost seems too predictable that this is what's happening.
Well, these kind of coalition grand parties work when they win, and they came very close. Let's be fair, but they did not win. Yeah. They did not win, and now the infighting begins because it's as if there is a centrist or moderately right of center element in British Columbia. Well, those were called the Liberals, and so they merged, and it did not work. And so to hold all of this together, you have to keep a lot of people happy and a lot of people that have strong opinions that will not hide them in the media. As you said, this is not surprising, but if the bleeding stops at three MLAs that, whether you like him or not, but I think in a general election could cause a lot of problem for the Conservative leader. Maybe you're better off if they form, what is they called, the Freedom Caucus or something?
I don't know. They'll come up with another name.
Well, it's not going to be United.
The BC United Conservative, I don't know, something like that.
I like party names. This is going to be a fun exercise.
Yeah, but British Columbia has the rule where you can't have a name that any other party had over the last 10 years.
10 years, huh?
So okay. it really limits the field. At some point, it'll just be like the fourth party, because there won't be any other names. But anyway, it will something to watch in British Columbia.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, next election is very far away. The NDP and the Greens just solidified their kind of supply and confidence agreement, so no election coming soon. But interesting to see this kind of drama, and we'll see how it unfolds over the next little while.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, number of the week. Let me go first, because maybe yours is more interesting than mine.
Okay.
My number of the week is 12.
Okay.
Do you know why?
Threshold for official party status for the
Bingo.
NDP. Is that
Very
it?
Good, sir.
Boom.
That is it. 12 is the official party status threshold in the House of Commons. NDP might have some trouble with it. My projection, as I said, has them at 13 right now. Yeah. Yours has 14, I believe. They could be in a lot of trouble. And we continue to focus on this kind of epic battle between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney, the Liberals and the Conservatives, and the NDP just keeps getting pushed and further and further and further by the wayside. I saw reporting this week that the NDP says that no one from Mark Carney's team has reached out to try to get a deal that they can go in the House of Commons. The NDP is sitting next to the phone hoping that somehow they'll still have some leverage. They have none. No. And I think they are in a ton of trouble. We did see that the Ontario NDP was able to concentrate resources, win some seats. The federal NDP is not as strong as the Ontario NDP is, I think, relatively speaking. No. And right now, I think that they are in a world of trouble. So 12 might be a big number for them come Election Day.
Yeah, these local races can help the NDP. It's just I'm not sure how many of them are there. I mean, to respond to your number of the week, that Léger poll puts the NDP at 11% in British Columbia.
Wow.
How many seats is that?
Sing's not winning with 11%.
They win maybe one on Vancouver Island. They get wiped out of Vancouver almost. Almost.
Maybe Vancouver East, they hold on to that one, but...
Yeah. The Liberals gain much of Vancouver with those numbers. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so my number of the week is 37. This is the final satisfaction number from Léger towards the Trudeau government. So are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the Canadian government led by Justin Trudeau? Final numbers, 37% satisfied, 57% dissatisfied, a minus 20. A minus 20 in any respect is kind of bad, but we had seen minus 50s and minus 45. So in some way, Justin Trudeau, can we say he succeeded in his exit? I mean, if he thinks that, should I just have, held on a little longer, maybe, but no. The fact that he decided to leave and the response that he offered the Trump administration was clearly positive in the minds of many Canadians. And so 37%, my number of the week this week.
Yeah, and 37% in a multi-party system.
Pretty good.
Enough to win, as we saw with some other governments like Doug Ford's in Ontario.
That's right.
You don't have to be super popular, and your government doesn't have to have super high ratings if they're still high enough and the other parties are not doing as well. We do have more of a competitive race this time, though, because the Conservatives are certainly stronger than Bonnie Crombie's Liberals or Marit Stiles' NDP. But anyway, that's a good one. Okay, 37 was also that tie, the number that both the Liberals and the Conservatives had in that Léger
That's right.
poll.
That's right.
I wonder if we're going to have another... When you think about it, the last two elections, the two parties were within a point of each other.
Yep.
Can you imagine we end up with a third consecutive election where those two parties are tied and the Liberals once again win more seats? It could make the Conservatives fans of electoral reform, if anything could.
Well, some of them maybe. That's a stretch, though. But we'll see. But we discussed this before, and I know we have to go, but a 33-33 tie, that's okay for the Liberals. A 37-37 tie is really good for the Liberals.
Majority, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. So we'll see.
We'll see. Okay, so we're going to record our mailbag episode. We got some great questions about, where could Carney run? This is one of the ones we'll be talking about. Some questions on methodology, how we do our projections, so we'll answer those. If you want to listen to that and you're not already a Patreon member, go to thenumberspod.ca. You can join us for $6 a month, and you can listen to that. And as I mentioned, during the campaign, we're expecting to do 2 episodes a week. We haven't. We're looking at maybe Mondays and Thursdays, and we'll have one bonus episode a week for members of the Patreon. So if you want to listen to that, again, join at thenumberspod.ca. All right, Philippe. Hope you get a little bit of rest over the weekend, because I have a feeling that we will be starting the sprint very soon. And we'll talk again. I usually say in 7 days, but I have a feeling it could be a bit sooner than that.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Have a great week. Head to the mailbag right now.